Good afternoon, everyone. This is my presentation on the theories of Black psychology. I do want to apologize first and foremost for being so late with my submission, but I have been under the weather and very sick. I'm finally getting my voice back, and I feel like a decent human being, so I'm ready to kick this off. I do apologize in advance if I do cough or anything of that nature. Like I said, I'm finally just getting back together. But let's jump on into this. The three theories that I chose are theory of planned behavior, social disorganization, and Vygotsky's social cognitive theory. We're going to jump on into the theory of planned behavior. I tried to make this presentation as simple and informative as I could. So, I'm going to probably talk more than what the actual presentation says within the slide. And that's because I kind of just wanted to put key points in here, but it's easier for me to verbally get out my thoughts to connect the dots and help you kind of understand where we're coming from with this. So the theory of planned behavior is basically the theory of planned behavior links one's behavior and thought process together. It's saying that your thought process is the determining factor of the behaviors that you're going to act for. That you're going to act out. I don't know if act for is actually a word, but it links together your thoughts and your actions. We're going to put it like that, thoughts and your actions. So like I said right here, think of this as why do we do the things we do and act the way that we do? Okay. So a little bit of background information about the theory of planned behavior. It started off as a theory of action in 1980 to predict an individual's intention to engage in a behavior at a specific time and place. The theory was intended to explain all behaviors over which people have the ability to exert self-control. The key component to this model is behavioral intent. Behavioral intentions are influenced by the attitude about the likelihood that the behavior will have the expected outcome and the subjective evaluation of the risks and benefits of that outcome. There are 6 constructs or key points about the theory of planned behavior that ties everything together. 1. Attitude. This refers to the degree to which a person has a favorable or unfavorable evaluation of the behavior of interest. Behavioral intention. This refers to the motivational factors that influences a given behavior. Whether the stronger the intention to perform the behavior, the more likely the behavior will be performed. And that makes a lot of sense because when you have an intention of doing something, 9 times out of 10, you're going to do it. You know, everything links together. The thought process, you have to have the thought process in your head. You have to have the thought in your head for you to carry it out. Okay? So the subjective norm, this refers to the belief about whether most people approve or disapprove of the behavior. It relates to a person's belief about whether peers and people of importance to that person think he or she should engage in behavior. And then you have social norms, which refers to the customary codes of behaviors in a group or larger cultural context. Perceived power, this refers to the perceived presence of factors that may facilitate or impede performance of a behavior. Perceived behavioral control, this refers to a person's perception of the ease or difficulty of performing the behavior of interest. And before we go on and start talking about social disorganization after this, what ties that behavior into Black psychology is if you think back to what I just mentioned in the previous slide about the theory of planned behavior, basically meaning why we think the way that we do and act the way that we do. And race and ethnicity and culture plays a big part in why we think the way that we do and why we act the way that we do. And I'll give you an example for that as different stuff that happens within life, whether, just for an example, racism. A person of color, a Black person, an African American, may respond and notice the racism faster than any other race, or they may take something more racially motivated than somebody else would. And it's like, why is your behavior, your reaction to this situation the way that it is? But it's because that being African American, growing up kind of like in similar environments sentiments or similar ways, because of the culture, you do think differently. If I can make that make sense, not saying that you think each race I think thinks differently from each other. It's just like being American. We all can think as an American on the same level, but when it comes down to ethnicity and race, we all think differently, and our intentions and the things that we do and carry out sometimes has different motives behind it or different reasoning, because everything that we do, it comes with some type of intention or reasoning why, and the reasoning will vary based on your background or what motivates you to do these different behaviors and things like that. So that's where theory of planned behavior comes in with Black psychology, and Black psychology being the study of African Americans and why this and why that. I think theory of planned behavior is a very good point, because that's basically what it is. As we mentioned about social norm, the custom codes of behavior in a group or people or larger cultural context. And we see this all the time because of you hear about stereotypical statements being made all the time, or feeling stereotypically about something, and those stereotypes basically represents the theory of planned behavior, the behaviors and the intentions and the thought processes that seem to be the same across, the same race and things like that. So that's how I would tie Black psychology into the theory of planned behavior. Moving on to social disorganization theory, which is a theory that grew out of a research that took place in Chicago by Shaw and McKay, using spatial maps to examine the residential locations of juveniles referred to Chicago courts. Shaw and McKay discovered that rates of crime were not evenly dispersed across time and space in the city. Instead, crime tended to be concentrated in particular areas of the city and, importantly, remained relatively stable within different areas, despite continual changes in the populations who lived there. And this is just to say, to do a I'm sorry, y'all. What does that have to do with Black psychology? It has a lot to do with it. As we've touched on in class before about how, we talked about environment and what's the difference for minorities and environments and stuff and their exposure and everything. Everything is environment. Your environment plays a major role. So sometimes, I don't know if you ever heard of the experiment where if you draw a circle around an ant, the ant will believe that it's trapped within the circle, even though it's all mental. The environment in which you stay in can have a very big impact on you, whether positive or negative. And I would take, for example, living in Henderson, North Carolina, myself, to see that even though a lot of people are leaving, a lot of people are coming in, the races are changing, like different ethnicities are moving in, different things are opening and closing and are becoming available too, as we still seem to be in this same cycle of crime. And to touch on that with Black psychology is to saying that sometimes our environment, the environment that a lot of African Americans are introduced to or grow up in, plays a major role in why that's still a factor. The two things I'm going to touch on right quick before going on into the next theory is that environment is a major key to a lot of things, and cycles are real. The cycles repeat themselves. They continue. When you're living in that environment and you see that this is what they got going on, and this might be a get-rich-quick scheme to help you out of the environment that you're in or what's going on around you, and you kind of fall into this cycle. Environment, sometimes you are a product of your environment. You tend to blend in with your environment. The things take place in your environment. You get sucked in, you get drawn in, and cycles are very real. These cycles continue. Vygotsky's theory, the last thing I touch on, I'm trying to wrap this up really quickly. The main point of the theory is that the cognitive development of children is advanced through social interaction with other people. In other words, social interaction with people is the foundation to their learning and thinking. And how does this relate to Black psychology? Social interaction sets the tone. Your thought process, as we're going to go back to the theory of planned behavior, is born through your social interaction and your environment growing up. When you're raised, like I'm just going to say, for example, in an African-American household, and you kind of learn the cultural traditions and everything that falls in line with that, and the social interactions that you carry on with one another, which are sometimes repeats of the social interactions that African-Americans have been having with each other all together. And it really does plays a big part in your development, and you kind of see where you develop a certain way of thinking. So my way of looking at cognitive anything is your thought process. How you think within your head, and social interactions develop that. So in the end, to tie everything up in this presentation, because I'm going a little bit over the time, is to say that to tie all three, these three theories are they have a connection. Because if you look at the environment and thought process and behavior all being linked together, there you have the theory of planned behavior, and your behavior comes off of your thought process. This basically says right here that your social interaction develops your thought process. So what you endure as a child, what you go through as a child environmentally, like in your environment with your family, how you interact with them, will set the tone for how you think and then how you will carry out what you think. So you start off right here with Vygotsky's theory of social interaction. As a child, you socially interact, and that develops your cognitive skills. And then social disorganization, you see how the environment plays such a big role in what goes on around you. So in your environment. So you got what you've learned from social interaction, what you've been through your environment, and then you're going to go to the theory of planned behavior, and that's where all that stuff comes into play, and where your environment and your thought process carries out this action to whatever it may be. And it all goes back to Black psychology, because African American being cultural, we tend to have the same experiences, tend to have similar types of upbringing, similar types of different things of that nature. So in the end, it all ties together for how you think, the way that you think, why you think that way, where you're at, and what actions follow out behind that. I've already gone over the time, so I'm going to cut this presentation short, but just remember that those three theories have something all in common, and it all boils down to really cultural identity in a way, and just what you experience, how your experiences come together. And that is all.